instead of slowing down as it fights gravity, is heading out, it speeds up as it comes in because of the sun's gravity, and then it goes on the outward leg. It slows down because it's fighting gravity going out. This thing speeds up. Instead of slowing down, it speeds up like 40 miles an hour. It probably weighs 1 million tons. It's as big as a battleship and probably weighs as much as that. Not only that, when they bounce radar off it, we only notice it after it's flown by the Earth. They start bouncing deep space radar off it, it comes back metallic.
Welcome back. I am here with the illustrious Dr. John Brandenburg. Good to see you, my friend.
I'm embarrassed. Yeah. Well, anyway, no, I'm deeply honored and pleased to be on your show again, Sean. It's always a pleasure.
All right. So what on earth is going on with this 3-1 Atlas thing? Like, is it a Project Bluebeam psyop? Is it the real deal? Like, what the hell's going on?
This government has so many cards it's not showing. It's very difficult to figure out what is really going on. I'll give you an outline. A couple of years ago, just for context, this object came in flying like a bat out of hell, flew into the inner solar system and it was coming in as if it had fallen in from infinity, from beyond the sun's gravity. So it was traveling much faster than any other object in the solar system. So
this is
it's breaking all the speed limits. And this is called a Muamua. And so first thing they say is, okay, this thing is not a regular comet. They thought, well, it's a kind of a comet, dirty snowball. And they said, okay, it's coming in too fast to be a regular comet. It's got to be from outside the solar system. Okay, fine. We would expect that at some point if we start looking carefully. Okay, then they're tracking this thing, and it's obvious it's not a comet because it's not putting out a tail. It's not putting out a dirty snowball that starts to evaporate as it gets close to the sun and puts out a bunch of water vapor and dust and makes a tail. The tail always points away from the sun, no matter how it's moving. If it's moving beside the sun, it goes out from the sun at right angles to its path. If it's coming in, the tail goes behind it, where it comes from. It goes backwards along its trajectory. If it's leaving the sun's influence, and heading back out of the solar system, then the tail would actually point in the direction away from the sun. Again, it would point in the direction it was moving. This thing doesn't have a tail. It's like it's a rock.
Yeah, that's weird.
Okay, so that's the second peculiar thing. And then there's a really peculiar thing. This thing comes in like a Messerschmitt 109 in World War II out of the sun. Mm-hmm. Comes almost directly from the sun. So nobody's looking in that direction. You can't point a telescope in that direction. You'll burn out all of the photosensors. So you have to, there's a solar exclusion zone you can't look at. It flies out of that. It flies right past one planet in the solar system. Us.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
It flies closer to us than anything else in the solar system, and it then goes out of the solar system, and it, instead of slowing down as it fights gravity, as it's heading out, it speeds up as it comes in because of the sun's gravity, and then it goes on the outward leg. It slows down because it's fighting gravity going out. This thing speeds up. Instead of slowing down, it speeds up like 40 miles an hour. It's probably weighs 1,000,000 tons. It's as big as a battleship and probably weighs as much as that. Not only that, when they bounce radar off it, it just, we only notice it after it's flown by the Earth. They start bouncing deep space radar off it, it comes back metallic. It's not a dirty snowball at all. It comes back as if it's a metallic reflector. And it's rotating, and it's obviously most asteroids and comets that they've been able to look at, they look like potatoes, potato-shaped. Roughly 1.5 to 1 aspect ratio. This one is 10 to 1 aspect ratio. It's a needle. So you finally say, okay, this thing is alien to the solar system. It flies an unusual trajectory and it aims right at the Earth. It doesn't leave a tail like a comet. It's got a 10 to 1 aspect ratio, and it speeds up as it's leaving. So this guy, Avi Loeb, who's a Harvard professor, and it's my understanding he was put through graduate school by the Mossad. So being an Israeli, he's naturally suspicious of everything. And that's good. That's good. Because I agree with him. This is highly suspicious. This doesn't look like a natural object. This looks like a reconnaissance.
Now, this is a Muamua we're still talking.
This is a Muamua. It looks like a recon vehicle directed at where we're standing, which would obviously attract more attention than anything else. You know, because of the big oceans on the Earth and because of all the radio noise we emit, that's the first thing anybody's going to look at when they come into the solar system. So it does a fast buzz by the Earth and then goes out to the solar system. Okay, and then they had another one, and this one is called Borisov, and it looked just like a regular comet. It looked like a dirty snowball. It comes in.
When you say another one, you mean an extra solar?
Another interstellar
that's like
object.
That's like the second ever that we.
Second ever. Okay, but it looks just like a dirty snowball. It doesn't particularly. There's nothing particularly unusual about its orbit or anything else. And it comes in way off. You know, the plane of the orbits of the planets is called the ecliptic. It comes in way off that plane and leaves, you know, curves around the sun and then leaves way off the plane, you know, like 40 degrees, something like this. Oumuamua, by the way, it came in about 50 degrees and then ended up flying along just almost exactly in the plane of the ecliptic to pass by the Earth. Okay.
So it had to change direction basically mid.
Well, it changes direction fairly naturally by curving around the sun. So we would have expected that. But what was low probability was it end up flying right along the ecliptic. Why does it end up flying right past the Earth? I mean, so that's very strange. And my saying is, if you're not slightly paranoid, you're not paying attention. Because there's all sorts of stuff going on that we obviously don't know. We don't understand what's going on. Uncle Sam is playing his cards close to his chest as far as extraterrestrial stuff. And then we get this interstellar visitor, and it doesn't behave like a natural object at all. So now we got this new one coming in. Oumuamua was about 400 meters long and about 40 meters in thickness. This thing is like 6 kilometers. It's huge. It's, 10 times bigger than Oumuamua. So the trend is not good, Sean. The trend is not good. So it comes in like a bat out of hell. So it's interstellar. And we're watching it. And it's not making a tail either, like a comet. It's roughly passing the orbit of Jupiter to come in. It'll come in, and it's not going to pass near the Earth. It's going to pass very close to Mars and very close to Jupiter on the way out. meaning it's flying almost exactly on the ecliptic. So it looks like somebody's taking a survey of the rest of the solar system. You know, the two most interesting planets in the solar system, one is Mars, and it probably could see that it used to have oceans or something like this.
Wasn't the sun between Mars and Jupiter when they did this?
No, the sun is going to, it turns out when this Atlas, 3I Atlas, passes Mars, and it's going to pass real close, the sun is going to be between the Earth and Mars. So we won't be able to observe it directly.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this looks, well, I'll give you my final assessment later.
By the way, Messerschmitts aren't the only thing that attacks with the sun to its back. Have you ever seen a hawk?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's just standard.
Animals do it too.
Animals do it too.
Pretty amazing. Yeah.
Because, you know, everybody knows that the sun is blinding and you can't look in that direction. And so this thing is not making water vapor. Now they're starting to get some pictures of it. It looks like a kind of cloudy, dusty thing. It looks sort of like a comet would expect to look, but there's no water vapor. And let me tell you, water, you know, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, okay? And then there's helium made by the stars, so the stars will shine. The third most abundant element in this universe is oxygen, believe it or not. Stars make oxygen. After they get done making helium, they start taking helium and turning it into oxygen. So water is the most abundant chemical in the universe. You know, it's a chemical compound. And this thing is not made of water. They don't know what it's made out of. And so once again, we have a very improbable event. You know, this thing is interstellar. We're not supposed to see this much interstellar stuff. Why are we seeing all this interstellar stuff now? People would have noticed this stuff before, but they didn't. So they've been tracking comets and stuff like this for, you know, decades. And you could have told, even with 1960s technology, we'd have been able to spot an interstellar comet. Now they're just suddenly noticing this stuff. Okay, so those are two peculiar things. These things are not classical comets, and their trajectories are highly improbable. One of them passed right by the Earth, and the other one is going to pass Jupiter and Mars, the two next most interesting planets in the solar system. And they say if you're out swimming near Hawaii and a shark comes up to you, first thing it'll do is bump you. And if you don't react, it comes around and takes a bite out of you. I mean, sharks don't like to work hard for their food. If they can tell it's meat, you're meat in the water, and if they bump you first and you don't react, that means an easy meal if you're a shark. And sharks are afraid of things. They're afraid of killer whales, for one thing. So the most dangerous thing you can do when a shark approaches you when you're swimming off Maui is nothing. Because it'll take one pass by you, probably bump you, and if you don't react, it'll come around and take 30 pounds of meat off you. So I'm saying just about anything we do to show that we have reacted to this would be good. Let's say it's natural. That both Oumuamua and Oumuamua, one guy called it Oumuamua 2. Just to say, there's some kind of freak. They're from a different star system. Who the hell knows what they are? One was an asteroid, a weird asteroid or something. So, okay. And if we fly a fast probe past it, take a good look at it, there's no harm done. We'll learn something. It's win-win. If It's a recon. The last thing we want to do is make them think that we didn't notice them. We want them to know. In fact, one of my ideas was to just set off a 1 megaton hydrogen bomb in deep space just to show that we're paying attention. You know, come back here again, and this is what you're going to get. And so, Abby,
by the way, how does that even work? There was a writing contest that I won, and Greg Benford was one of the judges. You know who Greg Benford
no kidding. You won an award or something?
Yeah, like in 2017. Like,
I hope they gave you some money for it or something.
Oh yeah. I made more on one short story then than any other short story.
No kidding.
Since.
Was that the one about the war in the future with all of the stuff on? It was, no, it wasn't. Oh well,
no.
Never mind.
But Greg Benford, I think we were all driving back to the airport. Was it? And they were talking about formulating like what would happen if you detonated, because they were talking about how to take down asteroids in space.
Yeah.
And when you detonate a nuclear weapon, there's no oxygen in space. So like you still get like gamma radiation and
oh yeah, you get everything.
So what happens? I didn't mean to derail the whole conversation, but
no. Yeah, what you get is an expanding fireball of plasma, and it starts out blue-white, and then as it cools off, it goes through every color of the rainbow. It goes, it cools off, goes from blue-white to white.
Does that have to do with like Boltzmann's constant black body radiation or something?
Yeah, it's black body. It goes through black body curve, and so it makes a nice light show. It'd be great fireworks. The day we have to nuke an asteroid, which is just inevitable, there'll be one in a collision course with Earth, and won't be able to reflect it. They'll have to nuke it, and it'll be a great show. It also puts out a lot of neutrons, like gamma rays, the whole spectrum. And I also suspect, because the universe is a little bit more complicated than they tell us, I suspect it sends out quantum interference that can be picked up 100 light years from here. It'll have a distinct signature of quantum interference, what's called quantum entanglement. I think that'll actually go out basically instantaneously. So when you set off a hydrogen bomb in space, everybody will know about it for about 100 light years, which is why it could be useful. Well, if this is what it looks like, by the way, Avi Loeb has now proposed that this is possibly another alien reconnaissance of the solar system. Now, we're all aware of the flying saucer, the UFO controversy, which means that everybody knows about us. So this could be somebody new.
Somebody less advanced.
Less advanced. And
not less advanced than us, less advanced than like
less advanced than the other
the anti-gravity grays and what.
And yeah, right. And the best thing I think to do is to demonstrate that we're a little nervous. You shouldn't go startling us, by flying stuff past us without announcing itself, we might do something stupid like launch a nuke at it next time, or the next time it brings along some buddies, launch nukes at them, So Avi Loeb thinks this is another recon mission, and I agree with him. And now Congresswoman Luna, she was part of the UFO task force in Congress. As it turns out, we have a probe orbiting Jupiter right now. And it's been there looking at Jupiter for like 5 years, gathered a lot of data. It's at the end of its mission. So what does NASA say? Well, we want to do a continuing mission, No, Avi Loeb and now Congresswoman Luna has said it's possible to take that probe, and it's still got enough rocket fuel on board to change orbits that it could actually whip around Jupiter and go out and chase this thing. So when this thing is going to pass near Jupiter, it just flies out and does a flyby by this thing as it comes by. And we get pictures of it, all sorts of readings on it. And the probe's already out there and it's already end of life. So why not? So I'm going to be urging people to email their congressional representatives or senators and urge them to do this. There's nothing, if it's an intelligent recon, seeing a space probe from us fly right past them, showing they've been made, that would be a very good thing to do. You know, like, we see you. Okay, we see it. We know you're probably casing the joint. Okay, but we got you marked. So we're living in a time when we're going to have to deal with more and more extraterrestrial. This is kind of, you could say the UFO phenomenon has been kind of an ongoing extraterrestrial crisis for 80 years. And now this one is a new one. And so I'm going to be urging everybody using my X account to be contacting their congressional representatives and urge them to immediately have NASA divert this probe to do a flyby of this thing. And
can we also execute the people who have been in charge of the cover-up because we're completely unprepared for it? So somebody should pay?
Sure.
I'm just saying like it is.
Well, look.
And offer $20 million to the first rat that comes out and rats on their friends? Well,
yeah, but you can't do that because they have to testify in the Epstein. They're all on the Epstein list. This government has so many skeletons and so many closets.
Here's an idea. You arrest them, you give a list of questions to the Kurds, and then you hand them over to the Kurds. The Kurds will hand you back a list of the questions.
And all the answers.
Now, whatever happened to the guy you handed them, the Kurds will just say, oh, we don't know.
We don't know. And maybe you acquired a new set of concrete overshoots.
But by the way, I know people who did that. They just gave a list of questions to the Kurds and a prisoner, and they would just get the answers back. It happened after Abu Ghraib, because the Iraqis wouldn't talk after that because they knew the U.S. didn't really torture.
Exactly. So that we had to find some contractors. Well, we also would hand them over to the Egyptians, as it turns out. And the Egyptians, and
the Kuwaitis,
and the Kuwaitis, and the Egyptians have been running a kingdom for 6,000 years. They know how to run things, And they view the United States as just a flash in the pan, How old are you compared to the pyramids?
So how old are the pyramids?
Well, yeah. They keep talking about these hidden chambers beneath the pyramids, and then you never hear anything more about it.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah,
all right, going back. I didn't mean to. I took.
Okay, no, that's okay. No, we're talking the general context we're living in, where we have a government that seems to be keeping a lot of knowledge, playing it close to the chest. We were waiting for the UFO, UAP stuff to be all declassified. That's not going to happen. I told one guy, I said, Trump can no more declassify the UFO files than he can move the Washington Monument. I think it would look nicer if it was moved a mile closer to the Lincoln Memorial. No, he can't do it. It's too ingrained in things. We were supposed to hear all about the JFK assassination. Mm-hmm. We were supposed to hear about the Martin Luther King assassination. Now we're supposed to hear about the Epstein suicide. Dead men tell no tales. That was, that's what I thought when I woke up one morning and turned on the news, and there he was dead in his cell in New York City. Yeah, this government likes to keep stuff secret. Knowledge is power. And the powerful like to keep certain knowledges to themselves. And it's always been that way with the human race. It used to be we had just a hereditary aristocracy. And now we instead have a bunch of big money men and who knows what else. And it's just been that way. I'll tell you one funny story. I think, anyway, every country on earth runs this way. Just because we're the United States doesn't mean we can't escape the traditional way that human societies are organized, where they have a kind of an aristocracy. And that aristocracy naturally just likes to keep certain knowledge to itself because knowledge is power. They want to hang on to their power. But in this case, so here's the bottom line. This thing looks highly suspicious. And what we have to do is urge the government to do something about it. And then take careful note if they say, oh, we can't move the probe from Jupiter. We have valuable scientific things we're trying to learn at Jupiter. They're too important to waste this probe on this piece of junk flying past us. You know, you could very well get that answer from them, where they'll just say, oh, no. It's impossible for us to move that probe from Jupiter. We can't do it. I tell people, I said, this Oumuamua 1 and Oumuamua 2, which is the most recent one, I said, these are intelligence tests. Is the human race actually intelligent? You know, part of my talk, one talk I gave showed the Trojan horse outside the gates of Troy. And these two soldiers at the gate are saying, well, let's just let it in. What's the worst that can happen? You know, so you have an intelligence test. And then you have intelligence agencies. And they could possibly come up with a dozen different reasons why sending a probe to look at this thing as it flies by Jupiter would be highly dangerous. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, it seems like obviously a smart thing to do for a lot of reasons. And so we're living in a time when the whole ET cover-up, you know, and you know, I wrote this book called Cosmic Awakening, where I discussed, you know, the fact that we have a UFO cover-up, we have a Mars cover-up, we even have a meteorite cover-up. You know, we've already found meteorites with bacteria, fossils in them. So we know there's life out there. These meteorites have never even, have been floating in space since they were formed, and they apparently had bacterial fossils in them. So we have a vast ET cover-up, and the cover-up is as big as the night sky. And I discuss this in my book, Cosmic Awakening. But I'm also an optimist, Sean. We'll get through this period. Our future will look like Star Trek. I mean, the future depicted in Star Trek was not perfect. I mean, there were Klingons and Romulans and stuff like that people will. But overall, things were good for the human race. We were an important part of the Federation. And it'll be okay. But there's one good thing you can surmise from this. Let's just say the worst possible outcome is we are being reconned. You know, somebody's casing the joint. They weren't really that clever about it. Or what they did is they grossly underestimated us if they thought we weren't going to notice this. You got to admit it. They apparently made attempts to keep, let's just say it was a recon. They made attempts to try and cover it up. But it didn't work. They may have grossly underestimated our technological abilities. And that's always heartening. it's very heartening to realize that, well, in my novel about the end of the UFO cover-up, where a bunch of high officials in the UFO cover-up end up getting shot at the end for treason. Hey, it's science fiction. That's not real.
Hey, I think this sounds like justice to me.
Yeah, and so
I might be a little bit more creative than, I think it's mercy just
you want to turn them over to the Kurds. I know, but
I could think of some more, just sit them next to like an anthill, red anthill, and just pour honey on them and just tie them there and just leave them there.
Let the ants do the rest. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything except pour honey on them.
I did nothing. I know nothing.
Know nothing. The Russian phrase, "Я ничего не знаю." I don't know nothing about nothing. The Russians love double negatives for emphasis. And so we're in a situation where the worst possible situations were being reconned, but we're wise to it. At least people who are paying attention are wise to it. And also that means that they've grossly underestimated us if they think that these ploys have gone unnoticed,
Or the whole thing's a big distraction and there's some geophysical event that's going to wipe out 3/4 of the human population, and this is just a distraction. While Bezos and company are all building their deep bunkers.
You know why I don't think they're covering up a big catastrophe that's going to wipe out 3/4 of the human race?
Because they couldn't keep that secret.
Well, yeah, our government is not competent to keep that secret, but also just think what that would do to the stock market. These people would lose a whole bunch of money if that happened. I mean, but I have a character in my book about the collapse of the UFO cover-up, and she says, not only is intelligence found elsewhere in the cosmos, but so is gross incompetence. And that's part of intelligence too, being too smart. And so if somebody was trying to do this and was really clever about it, they would have thrown this thing in like a Oumuamua 1. They would have not have it pass that close to the Earth. They wouldn't have had it come out of the sun. They would have just had it just fly by, or they would have put some ice on the outside of it so it would evaporate water and look like a regular comet. Mm-hmm. They could have done stuff like that, but they didn't. That would have been really clever. Instead, they...
Well, it looks like this thing does have slight aspects or signature of a comet, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, they may have been monitoring our broadcasts and said, well, this next one, we got to make it look more like a comet.
Yeah.
The first model for the Trojan horse, it didn't look enough like a horse. It or it's a dragon or something, and then they had, no, that's too threatening. Let's make just a horse and Mr. Ed. And so that is heartening. If this was a recon, they've already made a bunch of mistakes. But I think the best thing to do is urge our government to actually react in a very active way to this. And we'll also find out what our own government's agenda is. If they come back and say, oh, it would be highly dangerous to take a picture of this at close range, then you say, dangerous to who? Your job? I mean, if the UFO cover-up goes away, you're going to try and go find another job, and your resume just says redacted. So, yeah, in my novel, the Special Forces people who support the UFO cover-up, when they shoot down a UFO, they go form a cordon around it. They're called the Operation Dark Carnival, and a bunch of Navy SEALs and Green Berets and stuff. And they form a cordon around it and then bring in trucks to, and they neutralize the crew. If there's any of the crew still alive, they neutralize them, as they say. That's one of the latest euphemisms. So-and-so was neutralized. Was he highly charged? Yes. Actually, we never had a chance to charge him. He was charged posthumously with, and so what they do is they say the UFO cover-up in the book, they start out in the book saying the UFO cover-up will not end till doomsday. And it's because of two women, newscasters, and of course they're very glamorous, bring down the UFO cover-up. One's Asian and one's blonde. And they bring down the UFO cover-up and they're surprisingly effective. So the people in the Operation Dark Carnival, or the Carney as they call themselves, start saying, doomsday is coming. And they're all talking, they're sitting in their cars, keeping people under surveillance, and they'll talk to each other. These two guys are sitting there keeping this house under surveillance, and they're sitting there saying, doomsday is coming. And I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing on doomsday. I'm going to be making tracks to the Mexican border. He says, nobody's ever going to find me and ask me, what did I know and when did I know it? They all go into CYA mode, immediately. And so I think things like this are going to become more and more frequent. I mean, look at the supposed drone UAP. Right? We've all forgotten about that. Oh,
I haven't.
I haven't forgotten about it. And we thought when we had a presidential election, we'd get to know the truth about all of that.
Yep.
Oh, no. And even Congresswoman Luna and Burchett and a bunch of those guys who were so eager to learn all about UAPs, they got briefed. And then they got really quiet after they were briefed.
Why do you think they got quiet?
Oh, I was working on the Clementine mission to the moon. Mm-hmm. And we were going to the moon, and JPL had launched a thing called Mars Observer to Mars. And they were bragging that they were going to take a picture of the face on Mars and show that it was just nothing but a pile of rocks and all of this stuff. There's all this yakking about that. Oh, we're going to show you. And then, of course, it was supposed to go into Mars orbit and just suddenly disappeared. It just didn't talk anymore. That's what happened. And I asked one of the guys, the people at Naval Research Lab were supposed to do the accident report on it because, they're independent. They're another space lab, and they were supposed to review JPL's work on it. And this guy said, how many different ways can you interpret silence? And so Burchett, Luna, Trey Gowdy, all these people who normally are very talkative, you don't hear them say anything about that. So for all I know, they went in there expecting to get briefings and videotapes of all sorts of UFO stuff. And instead they showed them videotapes of them at hotels in compromising positions. There, that's what we're going to release first before we release any UFO stuff. So I don't know. It's one of these situations where it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's more like 1 step forward, 2 steps back constantly.
Well, it seems like that, but no, we're actually making progress. We actually had people under oath saying, talking about crashes.
John, I think the only progress that I would see at this point is burning the whole thing down. That would be progress. I'm serious. Like I've lost all confidence.
Being half Irish myself, I understand.
Just burn it down. Burn it down.
I'd like to buy
They're
you
all
a beer.
corrupt. They're all useless. Yeah.
Me bucko, let me buy you a beer, you little pass.
Just burn it down. Burn it down. I'm sincere. The Greys show up. I'm like, I'm on your side as long as you burn these guys down.
Don't talk like that. I've talked to people who've actually met the Greys firsthand, and no, you don't want to They're the scum of the galaxy. And in fact, somebody asked me, why would we hook up? Why would the U.S. government get involved with such a despicable bunch of aliens, you know?
Because they're despicable. Because they're more despicable, John. Because they're more despicable.
And the answer was, well, it's for the same reason we worked with Noriega and Papa Doc Duvalier in Haiti, you know, is that people who are despicable are easier to work with for this government. I mean, you start getting all noble, you know, and it causes nothing but trouble. But, you know, the Greys, we understand them. Mostly. So it is a time of transition, but we will get through it. You know, genetically, I'm half Irish. So, and you're like 3/4, right? Something like that.
No, I'd say half.
About half, yeah, about half. The Irish got around. They did. And so the whole human race comes from a long list of survivors. And not only that, the human race is not only can go through great emotional traumas, but is actually a bunch of adrenaline junkies. I mean, for most of our history, you know, we were used to sitting down in our cave for an evening meal and looking up, and there's a cave bear who wants to move into the cave with you guys. You know, in fact, he says, "This is my cave." And, you know, you roust out the boys, and one of you, either the bear or the family in the cave, eats well that night. That's the way it goes. And they found graves from the Ice Age, apparently Ice Age chieftains, and they would have stacks of cave bear skulls, trophies. They apparently figured out how to kill cave bears, which stood roughly about 12 feet tall when they were bigger than grizzlies. They'd figured out how to kill them and then boil off the meat, all the meat off their skulls and keep the skulls as trophies. And they had stacks of these skulls. So the human race that's our ancestors. So I have high hopes for the human race. I do. And some people say, oh, we're a very violent, kind of paranoid bunch. Well, that's because we're products of life on Earth. And Earth is not an aberration on the cosmos. We're going to find out what were once considered vices are now virtues. You know, it's precisely, in fact, my own theory, it's precisely the fact that the Greys arrived here in the middle of World War II. The most ferocious, massive bloodletting in human history. And they got to watch it. They watched people fighting to the death at Berlin and Iwo Jima and all these places. And they didn't invade because they said, well, like in my novel, they finally analyze it. If you read Sun Tzu, the best way to win a war is without any fighting at all. You razzle-dazzle your foe, convince them that resistance is futile, and you just march in, you pay somebody to open the gate in the middle of the night, take over the place. Not only is that the best way to win a war, it's also the cheapest way to win a war. A long siege on a city, you know, or, you know, having to fight tooth and nail for every inch of some territory, that's really expensive in both lives and equipment and everything. And so just imagine you've arrived at planet Earth, you have some ships and stuff, but then you arrive and the human race is in the middle of World War II and finally sets off 2 atomic bombs. In fact, it sets off 3 of them. Tests one and then drop, you know, you watch all of that from space and you keep recalculating how much it's going to cost to actually try and you keep saying, well, this is a bad time to try and launch an invasion of Earth because they're in a really bad mood. And what happens then is the cost. Finally, the human race ends World War II, and then it has the Cold War, and both sides build up ridiculously large nuclear arsenals. I don't know if you'd ever be able to get a nuclear weapons expert to affirm this, but I can tell you, just based on designs you can see in Wikipedia, you can make a hydrogen or atomic bomb you can light with a Ronson lighter, because the primary thing that runs nuclear weapons is an explosive charge that compresses the plutonium core, which sets off the atomic bomb. Or if it's a hydrogen bomb, the atomic bomb then serves as the detonator for the hydrogen part of the reaction. But the beginning of the reaction is it's just high explosives, and you can set those off with blasting caps lit by fuses, and if you work at it, you can put that in as a feature on all nuclear weapons. So the best nuclear deterrent to an invasion from outer space, you don't even need rocket engines on these atomic bombs. All you need to do is just set them off. Threaten to set them off. And according to Philip Corso, the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War were both aware that the Greys and other races are out there. And they had a secret agreement. They had a secret treaty saying that if they felt the Earth was going to fall to the aliens, they would set off all their nuclear weapons just on the ground and poison the Earth, so that the ultimate scorched Earth policy. And of course, some of them thought, well, maybe we can survive in some underground shelters, and when we come out, they'll be gone. No. They would just, and what it was like, if you think the bank is going to foreclose on your house, you go buy a bunch of dynamite and wire the house full of dynamite, and then invite one of the bank people to come, in for a coffee, and point to the big fuse and the big Ronson lighter and just say, you want my house? Come and take it. You want my nuclear weapons? You keep telling me I should give up my nuclear weapons? To quote the Spartans, come and take them. And in fact,
how do you think this thing's going to evolve with 3I Atlas?
Well, it can evolve two different ways. One way it could evolve. Okay, two main forks in the road. One way it could evolve is NASA will come up with 100 different reasons why they can't divert this probe from Jupiter. They'll just say, oh, that would be highly dangerous. And you'd say, dangerous to who?
Yeah, there's no people there.
There's no people. Yeah, what do you mean it could be dangerous? I thought you told me that this is just an asteroid or just a comet. Well, how could flying by a comet be dangerous? And they say, oh, it would be dangerous to our overall strategy for exploring Jupiter. I mean, how many times have we been to Jupiter now? The pioneers went to Jupiter, and the Voyagers went to Jupiter, and we had some other probes that went to Jupiter. One of which, they actually just burned up in the Jovian atmosphere. They put it right into the Jovian atmosphere. And so that's one way. One way is the government comes up with 100 different excuses as to why it can't do this. And then we know that it's probably artificial and they don't want us to know it. They may actually, since nobody can monitor what they're doing out there, they may actually divert the probe to, and then they just won't tell us that they're done.
Yeah, that's probably more likely.
That's probably more like, okay. So either way, the public never gets to look at pictures of this thing close up. That's one fork in the road. The other fork is they could decide to speed up disclosure and say it is a recon, and they fly this probe past it, and get some good pictures, and it looks like the Battlestar Galactica. And, that's the other way. Now, Sean, speaker to Irishman's Irishman, which one do you think is most likely to happen?
The first one.
The first one. They're not going to show us any pictures of close-ups of this thing. And in fact, they may have spy satellites that already have close-up pictures of it. So what can we conclude from this, comrades? Well, we have an extraterrestrial cover-up, and the government is not ready to end it yet. I don't know when they're going to end it exactly. When there
is no government anymore. That's when it's going to end. When you have the modern equivalent of Robespierre chopping people's heads off with guillotines as part of the Department of Public Safety. That's
the French model, yes.
Mm-hmm. Let them eat cake. Here's your cake.
Let them eat cake.
Here's your cake. It's called a guillotine. Eat up.
Yeah, that's the first option. We'll call that the public wants to see pictures of this thing. Let them eat cake.
Yeah, exactly. Let them eat cake. Let them see pictures.
Let them see pictures. And
no, actually, it's the opposite. I don't even know what it would be. I wouldn't see any pictures, but
it's well, that was Dr. Strangelove bringing the Russian ambassador into the war room. George C. Scott, you're letting him see the big board. I mean, the Russians already know there's all these bombers that are going to bomb them. They already know that. It's not like, that's a big secret. And so I guess I don't know how, well, in my novel, the downfall of the UFO cover-up comes from inside the cover-up itself. And these women start getting all these classified documents leaked to them. And they find out after their lives have been threatened and everything like this, that somebody from the Washington Post talks to them and they say, well, why didn't you explore this? Why didn't you, explore the UFO cover? Why have we got to do it? And the lady from the Washington Post says, we just didn't feel like it would be a good thing for us to explore. And the blonde eyes, she squints at the Washington Post person. She says, oh, the source came to you first and offered you all the same documents and you wouldn't take them. Because the head of the UFO cover-up, when he realizes somebody in his own organization is leaking all these documents to these women, he says, well, nobody's going to pay any attention to those two bimbos anyway. 6 months later, he's dead. And his entire organization. So a lot of times something happens which exposes that everybody had miscalculated. And they finally make one too many miscalculations. It could be as much as, a UFO crashes in the middle of Fresno, California in the middle of the night, and they can't cover it up because everybody's out there filming it with their phones, and they say, well, it was a secret government project. And they said, yeah, but the people had big heads and big eyes. They weren't human. Something like that. I
don't know, though, because they've had mass settings like that, like the 1952 DC flyover.
Oh,
they also had the Farmington, New Mexico flyover.
Yes.
Right? And all that stuff is like, it never happened, nothing to see here.
Well, I chose two women characters because they're newscasters, and women like to talk about stuff. The special forces guys, they just, oh, that was a bad op last night. We lost, we had 2 letters home. Okay, I'll write the letters. 2 people got killed. Yeah, it was rough. And that's all they say about it. The women talk endlessly about all of this stuff, And one of the women says the unindicted co-conspirators in the UFO cover-up is the public itself, because it doesn't want to know. It does not want to know. It's got enough imagination to know that some of the stuff that will come out is not good. And as long as nobody's landing on the White House lawn, but they don't want to know about it. And it's easy to keep secrets that no one wants to know.
Any final words for the audience?
I would just say keep hoping and praying that we'll get through this. And here's my way of solving this. I got a way. We do Mars disclosure. There's a dead civilization on Mars. Mars used to look like Earth. There's a dead civilization there. It was apparently terminated by a thermonuclear holocaust, but we don't need to talk about that immediately. All we need to do is just show there's all this archaeology. And then we say, we got to go up and investigate this. And that turns disclosure from being a traumatic event to being a science fiction adventure movie. There. So that's what I think. That's the way I think it should end. They should disclose at Mars because Mars is threatening. UFOs flying over Washington, D.C., that's threatening. But a bunch of carved stone, pyramids and faces on Mars, that's not threatening because they're dead. So I think that is the best way to disclose that we're not alone in the universe in terms of other intelligences. And the faces of the objects, the faces depicted look like us. So they're not even that alien. In fact, the obvious question, are we the Martians? And I don't think so. I don't. They're too far apart.
Even though our circadian rhythms are closer to the Martian day than they are to the Earth day?
Well, that could be. We could have been fertilized by Mars just by microbes, and the microbes themselves actually had a circadian rhythm. So that, we just basically, and it was close enough to Earth that we just inherited that. But your point is very well taken. There's a great movie called 5 Million Years to Earth, made by the British in 1967. And it talks about a big Holocaust on Mars, and that the Martians had come to Earth and hybridized with human beings. And it was a good movie. And that kind of programming laid latent in the human race. But your point is well taken. But, you got to admit, it's a lot more interesting to have that's an interesting cocktail conversation than are we going to be invaded by people of 1,000 years ahead of us in technology. Instead of that discussion, we're going to have a discussion of, why do they look like us? And people will debate that endlessly, and people will say, well, we have to send people up there to investigate the ruins, find out what the real age of them is, et cetera, et cetera. So, like I said, it'll turn it into a science fiction adventure movie instead of a very traumatic. And the human mind likes to avoid traumas to itself. So it has circuit breakers that pop in its head, just saying, well, literally the brain says, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there either. Just, so human beings have a tendency to avoid unpleasant stuff as long as they can.
All right. Thank you, John. And we'll talk soon.
It's very good to talk. Always good to talk to you. And we'll know a lot more, hopefully, in the next couple months. So Fork in the Road 1 and Fork in the Road 2.
Yep.
Fork in the Road 1 is we're not telling you nothing.
Yep.
Fork in the Road 2 is look at this, Yeah.
Or they'll tell us something, but it'll be complete bullshit.
Well, one of the things I found out about really good psyops, you mix truthful stuff, about 70% truthful. You always mix what I call a destruct package in it so that you can say, oh, well, this is obviously wrong.
So the whole thing's wrong, right?
So the whole thing is wrong. And
right.
But it gets out. So why are we doing a science fiction movie? Science fiction. It's because we know that we can't do the disclosure. We're just going to aim to tell a story. about two beautiful women who bring down the UFO cover-up.
All right, my friend. Talk soon.
Okay, Sean. Good. Talk soon. Yeah, have a great night.
You too.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.